Across the world, ancient stones still stand where they were placed thousands of years ago, not as ruins of failure, but as survivors of forgotten decisions. Structures built without writing, without metal tools, without clear explanations. Some were aligned to the sky. Some were buried, reused, or quietly abandoned. Others remain unfinished, precise, deliberate, and unresolved. They do not tell us who built them. They ask us why. If you're drawn to the quiet mysteries of the deep past, to places that challenge simple timelines and easy answers, subscribe to the channel, because history isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a trace left in stone. Across the ancient world, water was never seen as a simple resource. It was not merely something to drink or wash with. To early civilizations, water was alive. It was a boundary and a bridge, a shimmering threshold between the human world and the realm of gods, spirits, and unseen forces. From the steaming hot springs of Bath in Roman Britain, to the mineral-rich pools of Hierapolis in Anatolia, to the quiet forest wells revered by Celtic communities, people across continents built sanctuaries around natural springs with a reverence that defied geography, language, and time. These places were not chosen at random. They were approached with awe, fear, and devotion. They were not bathing facilities in the modern sense. They were sacred thresholds, places where healing, worship, and mystery converged. And yet, one question still lingers beneath the rising mist. Who first recognized these springs as places of power? And why did so many civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, treat water in exactly the same way? Long before organized religion or written theology, humans looked at springs with a mixture of wonder and unease. They emerged from the earth without warning, flowed endlessly, and resisted human control. To early minds, this was no coincidence. Springs felt like gifts or messages from something deeper. Ancient myths across cultures describe water as the breath of creation itself. It could give life, restore strength, or erase existence entirely. To touch it was to touch something eternal. In ancient Greece, every spring was believed to be inhabited by a nymph, a divine presence capable of blessing or punishing those who approached without respect. In Roman Britain, the waters at Bath were dedicated to Sulis Minerva, a goddess who merged indigenous Celtic beliefs with Roman concepts of healing and wisdom. Across Celtic lands, offerings of bronze, gold, weapons, and occasionally human lives were cast into watery depths, not as sacrifices to be destroyed, but as messages entrusted to the water itself. Unlike stone temples raised toward the sky or fire altars built to command flame, sanctuaries around springs were shaped to follow the land's natural rhythm. Builders did not impose their will on the environment, they adapted to it. Channels were cut to guide hot water through pools, terraces, and steam-filled chambers lined with stone, lead, and clay. At Bath, the Roman complex rose directly around the spring, blending advanced engineering with sacred purpose. Steam filled the air, blurring the line between body and spirit. Worship here was not abstract, it was sensory, it was physical. Some sanctuaries were designed with deliberate acoustic effects. Hidden cavities and underground passages allowed voices to travel upward so that prayers or priestly words seemed to rise directly from the earth. To worshippers, the god was not imagined above them, but beneath their feet. These were not architectural accidents. They were intentional designs, sacred technologies whose full psychological impact we are only beginning to understand. When archaeologists excavated the sacred springs of Bath, Bourbon-Lancy, and Claremont, they uncovered thousands of offerings: coins worn smooth by handling, small figurines, rings, jewelry, and thin sheets of lead etched with words. These inscriptions were not praises alone, many were curses. "May the one who stole my cloak never know rest until it is returned. Let sickness follow the lyre. Grant justice where men have failed. The spring was healer, judge, and witness. To cast something valuable into its depths was not wasteful. It was a transaction, a plea, a confession entrusted to a force believed to listen and remember. Each ripple carried human fear, hope, and desperation, expressed in a language older than writing. For centuries, sacred springs sanctuaries served as both places of faith and centers of healing. Pilgrims traveled vast distances seeking cures when medicine had failed them. The sick, wounded, and broken came believing that the water carried divine presence. At Epidaurus, the sanctuary of Asclepius, visitors slept beside sacred springs in a ritual known as incubation. Dreams were believed to bring visions of the god diagnosing or curing illness. Many awoke convinced they had been healed and left offerings of gratitude behind. While modern science confirms that mineral-rich waters had therapeutic effects, the ancients believed the true healing came from the spirit within the water itself. Over time, this fusion of purification, belief, and renewal shaped later religious rituals, most notably baptism, where water symbolized not only cleansing of the body, but rebirth of the soul. What makes these sacred springs even more remarkable is their global consistency. In Japan, Shinto priests guarded hot springs and waterfalls as homes of kami, divine spirits bound to the land. In the Andes, Inca shamans poured offerings of silver and water to honor mountain deities believed to breathe through clouds and stone. In Anatolia, Phrygian shrines were built above steaming vents where vapor rose like the breath of the earth itself. These cultures never met, yet all perceived water as a living force, a mediator between humanity, nature, and the divine. Modern geology offers further insight. Many sacred springs lie along fault lines, geothermal zones, or areas where gases and minerals seep from deep underground. At Delphi, trance states were likely induced by naturally occurring vapors. At Hierapolis, carbon dioxide pooled near the so-called plutonium, killing animals while priests, who understood its behavior, survived. Recent acoustic studies suggest that moving water in enclosed spaces can generate low-frequency vibrations capable of altering human perception and emotional states. To ancient people, these effects were proof of divinity. To modern science, they reveal a profound understanding of environment and human psychology, people shaping sacred spaces not against nature, but through it. For a long time, scholars believed the Greeks and Romans invented spring cults, but archaeology continues to challenge that idea. Beneath many classical sanctuaries lie earlier layers, primitive altars, carved stones, and votive pits dating to the Bronze Age and beyond. At Bath, Celtic offerings predate Roman occupation by centuries. In central Italy, Etruscan water sanctuaries existed before Rome rose to power. In Anatolia, Phrygian shrines echo later Greco-Roman designs almost exactly. So who taught whom? Did each civilization independently rediscover the sacred nature of water? Or did they inherit fragments of something far older? Some researches suggest the reverence for springs may trace back to the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers created the first stable sources of fresh water. To early humans, these places meant survival, and survival was sacred. Others propose the existence of a prehistoric network of ritual sites spanning Eurasia, linked not by empire, but by belief. If so, Greek nymphs, Roman goddesses, and Celtic spirits may all be descendants of a single ancient archetype, a primordial mother of waters, whose sanctuaries once dotted the landscape long before history recorded names. The architecture, the offerings, the healing rites, these may all be echoes of a forgotten cult, adapted and reinterpreted by civilizations that no longer remembered its origin. Modern science can explain the minerals, the heat, and even some healing effects of these waters, but it cannot explain the ancient instinct to kneel beside them. Across continents and ages, humanity chose water as the voice of the divine. Sanctuaries were carved around springs rather than atop mountains, perhaps because water moves, transforms, disappears, and returns, just like life itself. To the ancients, every bubbling spring was the Earth's heartbeat, proof that the planet lived and breathed. And today, at Bath, Delphi, and Hierapolis, the same mist still rises, guarding a question that remains unanswered. Who first built these sacred springs, and what unseen power guided their hands? What if one of humanity's greatest legends was never a myth at all? For centuries, the tale of Troy, the city of heroes, gods, betrayal, and war, was dismissed as nothing more than poetic imagination. A beautiful story, yes, but one believed to belong entirely to the realm of fiction. And yet, beneath the windswept hills of western Turkey, archaeology has been quietly challenging that assumption. Stone by stone, layer by layer, evidence suggests that the city sung of by Homer may have been real, built by human hands, defended by living warriors, and destroyed by forces far more tangible than legend alone. This is where myth begins to bleed into history. From the soil emerge massive stone walls, their scale and age defying early expectations. Charred ruins, shattered weapons, and traces of ancient lives whisper of a civilization that once stood at the crossroads between East and West, where the Aegean world met Anatolia. As modern technology uncovers secrets long buried beneath the earth, one question grows louder with every discovery. Was Troy merely a story passed down through poetry? Or was it the fragmented memory of a world that truly existed? And if Troy was real, was it once a powerful regional center lost to time, or simply a city made immortal by legend? In the 19th century, the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann began excavations at a mound known as Hisarlik in northwestern Turkey. What he uncovered stunned the academic world. Rather than a single ancient city, Schliemann revealed multiple layers of settlement, each built atop the ruins of the last. Walls, gates, weapons, and everyday objects emerged from the earth, pointing to a place of immense strategic importance. Positioned between the Aegean world and the interior of Asia Minor. Here was a crossroads of trade, diplomacy, and conflict, exactly the kind of setting one would expect for a city fought over for generations. Modern archaeology has since confirmed that at least 9 major settlement layers exist at Troy, spanning more than 2,000 years. Each layer represents a different city, built, destroyed, and rebuilt again and again. Troy, it seems, was never a single city frozen in time. It was a living place, reshaped by war, fire, earthquakes, and human resilience. When Schliemann announced that he had uncovered what he called the treasure of King Priam, hundreds of gold, silver, and bronze objects, the world was electrified. Newspapers hailed it as proof that Homer's epic was history made real. Yet with time came skepticism. Today, most scholars agree that these artifacts do not belong to a single ruler or even a single moment in time. Some may predate the Trojan War era by centuries. Still, one truth remains undisputed. The artifacts came from Troy itself, from a city that burned, bled, and fell. The layer most often linked to Homer's war is known as Troy 7a, dated to around 1200 BCE. Here, archaeologists discovered unmistakable signs of violent destruction. Buildings collapsed in flames. Bronze spearheads and arrow points were found embedded in the ruins. Human remains lay buried beneath fallen walls, suggesting chaos, not peaceful abandonment. There is no absolute proof that this destruction was the Trojan War described in the Iliad, but there is equally no doubt that a real and devastating conflict took place here. In the early 21st century, renewed excavations by German and Turkish teams revealed something even more astonishing. The defensive architecture of Troy was unlike anything previously expected from a Bronze Age city.
Its walls were built from massive limestone blocks, some weighing many tons, fitted together with extraordinary precision. They stood over 10 meters high in places and several meters thick, sloping slightly inward, a deliberate design that helped deflect force rather than absorb it. This subtle architectural choice mirrors principles used in much later military fortifications.
Covered ramps led toward fortified gates. Drainage systems ran beneath the walls to protect them from erosion. Watchtowers were positioned for maximum visibility across the plains. The result was a defensive system so advanced that some experts remarked, if we did not know the date, we might assume this was a Roman fortress. How could a Bronze Age city achieve such engineering sophistication? The stonework itself deepens the mystery. The blocks were cut and fitted so tightly that mortar was unnecessary. Gaps are nearly invisible. Tool marks are minimal. The joins appear clean and deliberate, as if the stone had been shaped with extraordinary care rather than brute force. This precision has drawn comparisons to the stonework of the Inca civilization in South America, another society that mastered seamless masonry despite vast distances and no known contact. Of course, no connection exists between the two cultures, yet the similarity raises an intriguing question. How many advanced construction traditions have been lost to time? Some scholars propose that Trojan builders inherited techniques from earlier Anatolian or Near Eastern cultures, now largely forgotten. Others suggest that generations of experimentation led to mastery through knowledge we no longer fully understand. More speculative ideas exist, but archaeology remains cautious, grounding interpretation in evidence rather than wonder. What is undeniable is this: radar scans and 3D imaging reveal the deeper portions of Troy's fortifications remain buried, intact, and remarkably stable, surviving earthquakes, erosion, and more than 3,000 years of history. Beyond its walls, Troy reveals itself not merely as a fortress, but as a thriving city. Excavations uncovered extensive residential districts stretching far beyond the citadel, confirming that Troy housed a large population. Carefully planned drainage systems suggest urban foresight. Granaries and administrative buildings point to centralized authority and organized governance. Religious sanctuaries indicate ritual life and shared belief, while traces of metalworking, pottery, and artisan tools reveal an economy driven by skilled labor. Troy was not isolated. It was a hub, connected through trade routes that reached the Aegean, Anatolia, and beyond. Limited genetic studies of human remains suggest a mixed population, reflecting Troy's position as a cultural crossroads. Its people were neither purely Greek nor exclusively Anatolian, but shaped by centuries of movement, trade, and conflict. Strikingly, many of Homer's descriptions, sloping walls, fortified gates, watchtowers overlooking the plain, align closely with archaeological findings. Not perfectly and not in every detail, but closely enough to raise an unsettling possibility. Was Homer simply inventing? Or was he preserving fragments of real memories, oral histories passed down by generations who remembered the fall of a great city? Today, Troy stands as more than an archaeological site. It is a symbol of human ambition, ingenuity, and tragedy. Its stones speak silently of pride and innovation, of resilience and collapse. Beneath the soil of Hisarlik lies not just the remains of a city, but the blurred boundary between legend and history. Who designed those defensive walls that still defy time? Where did their builders learn such techniques? Did they inherit knowledge from an older world now erased? Or were the Trojans themselves pioneers of an engineering tradition lost to history? And finally, was Troy merely a single city elevated by poetry? Or was it the last surviving echo of a far older world that vanished before history learned to write its first lines?
These questions linger like echoes over the wind-swept ruins, reminding us that behind every legend there may lie a truth still waiting to be uncovered. In the highlands of Armenia, where jagged mountains rise like sentinels over an ancient land, stands a structure unlike any other on Earth. At first glance, Etchmiadzin Cathedral appears timeless, its stone walls calm, weathered, and enduring. Yet beneath that stillness lies a story that stretches across empires, beliefs, and the very evolution of human faith. Etchmiadzin is widely regarded as the oldest surviving state-built Christian cathedral in the world. For more than 17 centuries, it has stood at the spiritual heart of Armenia, witnessing the birth of nations, the collapse of empires, and humanity's gradual shift from polytheism to monotheism. But behind its sacred status lies a question that refuses to fade. Was Etchmiadzin truly the first Christian church ever built? Or is it something far older, reborn rather than created? Armenia occupies a unique place in religious history. In the early 4th century AD, around 301 AD, it became the first kingdom in the world to officially adopt Christianity as a state religion, decades before the Roman Empire would follow. This transformation was led by King Tiridates III and Gregory the Illuminator, a former prisoner turned spiritual leader whose influence reshaped the identity of an entire people. According to Armenian tradition, the founding of Etchmiadzin was not the result of political planning, but divine instruction. Gregory is said to have experienced a vision in which Christ descended from the heavens and struck the ground with a golden hammer, marking the precise spot where a cathedral was to be built. The name Etchmiadzin itself means the descent of the only begotten. This vision did more than inspire architecture. It forged a national identity. For Armenians, Etchmiadzin became not merely a place of worship, but a sacred axis, a meeting point between heaven and earth. Every stone carried meaning, every dimension echoed belief. Yet archaeology introduces a deeper, more complex layer to the story. Excavations beneath the cathedral reveal that Etchmiadzin was built atop the remains of an earlier pagan structure, likely a temple associated with pre-Christian Armenian religion. Before Christianity, Armenians worshipped a pantheon of gods, influenced by Persian, Mesopotamian, and local traditions. Deities such as Aramzad, the supreme creator god, and Anahit, the goddess of fertility and wisdom, were honored in sanctuaries across the region. Evidence suggests that the Christian cathedral reused foundations and materials from this earlier sacred site. This was not unusual in late antiquity. Across the ancient world, new religions often rose upon the physical remains of older ones, not as accidents, but as deliberate acts of transformation. This raises an unsettling but profound question. If Etchmiadzin was constructed directly over a pagan sanctuary, can it still be called the first Christian church? Or does it instead represent the moment when one spiritual world was consciously reshaped into another? Rather than erasing the past, Etchmiadzin may embody continuity, the burial of older gods beneath a new altar, symbolizing not destruction but transition. Even stripped of legend, the cathedral's architecture remains extraordinary. Originally constructed in the early 4th century and later rebuilt in stone during the 5th, Etchmiadzin displays a domed cruciform design far ahead of its time. Such structural sophistication would not appear in Western Christian architecture for centuries. The symmetry is precise, the geometry intentional. In several sections, stone blocks were cut and fitted with such accuracy that mortar was barely needed. The architectural language of Etchmiadzin blends local Armenian traditions with influences from Persian, Roman, and early Byzantine design, predating the formal codification of Byzantine architecture itself. This suggests not divine mystery, but deep technical knowledge, possibly inherited from earlier temple-building traditions passed down through generations of craftsmen. Inside, light plays a deliberate role. Narrow shafts illuminate the interior at specific angles, creating a sense of vertical ascent. The space feels less like a room and more like a contained silence, where architecture itself becomes an act of devotion.
Etchmiadzin also houses some of Christianity's most revered relics. Among them are objects traditionally identified as a fragment of the true cross and the Holy Lance, believed by tradition to be the spear that pierced Christ's side. These relics are preserved by the Armenian Apostolic Church and displayed only on rare occasions. Legends persist of additional artifacts and manuscripts kept hidden, texts predating Christianity, written in unknown scripts, remnants of Armenia's pre-Christian spiritual world. While no conclusive evidence supports these claims, the Church's silence has only fueled speculation. Through centuries of invasion and upheaval, Etchmiadzin endured. Arab conquests, Mongol invasions, Persian rule, Ottoman pressure, earthquakes and wars reshaped the land, but the cathedral remained standing, repaired, reinforced, and rebuilt, yet never erased. Engineers note that its proportions helped disperse seismic energy, allowing it to survive earthquakes that destroyed surrounding settlements. For believers, however, survival is not engineering, it is destiny. The question of firstness remains contested. Early Christian worship spaces existed long before Etchmiadzin. The Dura Europos house church in modern Syria dates to around AD 233, earlier than Armenia's conversion, but these were private homes adapted for worship, not monumental cathedrals built by a Christian state. In that sense, Etchmiadzin may indeed be the first purpose-built national Christian cathedral, a prototype for Christian sacred architecture that followed. Yet if it rose upon a pagan foundation, it becomes something even more profound. Not a beginning, but a bridge. Some researchers note possible alignments with solar cycles, patterns more typical of pre-Christian temples. If intentional, this suggests the builders consciously merged ancient cosmology with new theology, transforming older sacred knowledge rather than discarding it. Etchmiadzin stands as a living contradiction, both Christian and pre-Christian, ancient and renewed. Its stones speak two languages at once. To Armenians, it is more than history, it is survival. Through exile, genocide, and diaspora, Etchmiadzin has remained the spiritual anchor of a scattered people. Its dome does not simply crown a building, it shelters memory. Today, pilgrims describe a strange stillness within its walls, a sensation that the ground itself remembers every prayer whispered there across centuries. Recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, Etchmiadzin is preserved but not explained. It stands between legend and archaeology, faith and evidence, heaven and earth. And the question remains, was Etchmiadzin the first Christian church, or the rebirth of something far older? Perhaps it is both, a monument not to replacement, but to transformation, a place where belief did not vanish, but changed form, where one world ended and another rose upon its foundations, and between them a mystery that still echoes through time. Beneath the constant rhythm of modern London, where glass towers rise above crowded streets and centuries overlap with every step, there lies a forgotten world, sealed beneath layers of time. Just below the ancient stones of Leadenhall Market, hidden from sight for nearly 2,000 years, rests one of the most important remnants of Roman Britain, the remains of Londinium's great Roman basilica. For centuries, it lay undisturbed, buried beneath medieval foundations, Victorian infrastructure, and the relentless expansion of a global city. Its silence endured until the early years of the 21st century, when construction work in the financial district unexpectedly cut into deep, ancient stonework. What began as a routine urban excavation quickly transformed into one of Britain's most significant archaeological revelations. Archaeologists soon realized they were standing inside the political heart of Roman London. This was no minor structure. The basilica once formed part of the Forum complex, the administrative and civic center of Londinium, founded shortly after the Roman invasion of Britain around AD 47. Stretching close to 100 meters in length and nearly 50 meters in width, the basilica dominated the skyline of Roman London. It was not the largest basilica north of the Alps, as was once sensationally claimed, but it was among the most ambitious civic buildings in Roman Britain, rivaling those of major provincial cities across the empire. Its scale alone forced historians to rethink Londinium's role. This was not a distant outpost at the edge of civilization. It was a carefully planned city designed to project Roman authority, law, and order into a land that Rome still struggled to fully control. The basilica towered over the forum below, its vast interior halls used for public assemblies, legal proceedings, commercial negotiations, and imperial administration. Roman governors would have walked its corridors, merchants would have gathered beneath its roof. Legal disputes were settled here under statues of emperors and symbols of imperial justice. Even today, the engineering behind the structure remains astonishing. Built from Kentish ragstone, reinforced with layers of Roman brick, and anchored deep into London's unstable, marshy soil, the foundations reveal a sophisticated understanding of local geography. Drainage channels were carefully designed to divert groundwater. Gravel beds and oak piles stabilized the immense weight of stone columns and towering walls. Every element reflects precision, planning, and access to imperial resources. Yet the basilica was not purely Roman in character. Close examination of the mortar, decorative fragments, and construction techniques reveal subtle local influences. British materials were blended with Roman methods. Craftsmanship shows signs of adaptation rather than simple imitation. This was not a foreign monument imposed without compromise. It was a structure shaped by cultural interaction, where Roman ambition met local skill. As excavation continued across the wider area of Roman Londinium, another discovery complicated the story. Only a short distance away, beneath what is now the Bloomberg Building, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Mithraeum, a subterranean temple dedicated to Mithras, the mysterious god of light, loyalty, and cosmic struggle. Though not physically beneath the basilica itself, its proximity to the forum complex raised unsettling questions about the relationship between civic power and secret belief. The Mithraeum was deliberately hidden below ground as Mithraic worship required. Narrow corridors led into a low-ceilinged sanctuary where initiates gathered by torchlight. Stone altars stood against the walls. Reliefs depicted Mithras slaying the sacred bull, a symbolic act representing the renewal of life and the cosmic order of the universe.
This was not a public religion. Mithraism was exclusive, secretive, and hierarchical. Its followers were often soldiers, officials, and administrators, men deeply embedded in the machinery of the Roman state. The artifacts found within the temple were striking. Oil lamps, bronze offerings, carved gemstones, fragments of inscriptions in Latin and Greek all pointed to a cosmopolitan community connected to religious traditions that stretched far beyond Britain. One relief showed zodiac imagery, linking Roman London to Eastern cosmological systems originating in Persia and the Near East. Many of these objects date to the 2nd century AD, particularly the reign of Emperor Hadrian, a period of consolidation and reform across the empire. Yet some materials appear unusually refined for the region, suggesting long-distance trade and specialized craftsmanship. Together, the basilica and the Mithraeum paint a picture far more complex than a simple administrative city. Beneath modern London lies an extensive network of Roman remains: roads, baths, warehouses, temples, drainage tunnels, interwoven beneath the streets. The Forum and Basilica stood at the center of this urban web, connected to the River Thames and the city's commercial lifelines. The nearby Mithraeum suggests that religious initiation and political authority may have operated side by side, if not openly intertwined. By the late 3rd century AD, something changed. Archaeological layers reveal signs of destruction, fire damage, collapsed masonry, and deliberate dismantling. Whether the basilica fell victim to disaster, economic decline, or political transition remains uncertain. As Roman power weakened in Britain, Londinium began to contract. Administrative functions shifted. Buildings were abandoned or repurposed. The Mithraeum, too, was eventually decommissioned. When Christianity rose to dominance within the empire, many pagan temples were closed, buried, or symbolically erased. Some scholars believe the Mithraeum was intentionally filled in to protect its sacred objects. Others suggest it was simply forgotten as the city transformed. No Roman historian recorded the final fate of the basilica. No inscription survives to tell us who commissioned it. No decree names its architects. The silence is complete. And that silence is the enduring mystery. Was the basilica an instrument of imperial dominance, designed to remind Britain of Rome's unchallenged authority? Or was it shaped by local elites, Romanized Britons who embraced Roman architecture while maintaining older beliefs? Why did a secretive cult like Mithraism flourish so close to the heart of civic power? Some archaeologists see this duality as intentional: an official public world above ground, governed by law and order, and a hidden spiritual world below, where loyalty, hierarchy, and cosmic meaning were reinforced through ritual. Administrators by day, initiates by night. Others propose a more subtle interpretation, that Roman rule in Britain required negotiation rather than force alone, blending authority with accommodation, empire with belief. Today, the remains of the basilica lie protected beneath the modern city, fragments preserved where they were found. Nearby, visitors can descend into the London Mithraeum, where dim lighting, echoes of Latin chants, and carefully reconstructed altars recreate the atmosphere of ancient ritual. Here, beneath the streets of one of the world's most modern cities, time folds in on itself. Roman citizens once stood where Londoners now walk. Power, faith, ambition, and mystery once converged here, just as they do today. The Basilica of Londinium remains silent, but its stones still ask the same questions they have carried for nearly 2,000 years. Who truly built it? What alliances were forged within its walls? And how many secrets still lie beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered? Beneath the wind-carved sands of northern Peru, at the ancient ceremonial complex of El Brujo, one of the most remarkable discoveries in South American archaeology lay hidden for more than 17 centuries. When it finally emerged, it forced historians to reconsider everything they believed about power, gender, and divinity in the ancient Andes. This was the tomb of a woman unlike any previously known from the pre-Columbian world. Today, she is called the Lady of Cow, but her true name has never been recorded. Her burial speaks in gold, blood, and sacred symbols, yet remains silent on the most essential question of all. Who was she, really? A mortal ruler? A supreme priestess? Or a woman elevated to divine status by her people? In 1996, a Peruvian archaeological team led by Regulo Franco Jordan uncovered a sealed burial chamber beneath the Huaca Cao Viejo pyramid at El Brujo. What they found stunned the academic world. Wrapped in fine cotton textiles and preserved with layers of cinnabar, the body of a young woman lay astonishingly intact, surrounded by regalia previously believed to belong exclusively to male rulers of the Moche civilization. The Moche culture, which flourished along Peru's northern coast between roughly 100 and 800 AD, was long thought to be rigidly patriarchal. Its ceramics, murals, and ritual scenes overwhelmingly depicted male warriors, male priests, and male figures presiding over sacrifice and power. For decades, scholars assumed leadership was exclusively masculine. The Lady of Cow shattered that assumption. Her burial position, the ceremonial objects around her, and the symbolism etched into her skin revealed something unprecedented. a woman who held supreme political and religious authority. Her body, small and slender, was covered in elaborate tattoos, preserved by the desert climate and mineral compounds. Snakes coil along her arms, spiders stretch across her hands, jaguars in sacred geometric patterns mark her fingers. In Moche belief, these creatures were not ornamental, they were spiritual forces, symbols of fertility, death, rain, warfare, and cosmic balance. Spiders represented blood and sacrifice. Serpents symbolized transformation and the movement between worlds. Jaguars embodied power and dominance. Together, these motifs suggest that the Lady of Cow was not merely a ruler, but a ritual embodiment of divine order, standing at the intersection of life and death. Around her lay hundreds of ceremonial objects, gold and silver ornaments, copper scepters, shell jewelry, finely crafted crowns, and ritual weapons. Among them were tumi knives, ceremonial blades closely associated with sacrifice and priestly authority. The richness of the tomb rivaled that of the most powerful Moche male elites, including the famous Lord of Sipan. But this was not simply royal wealth. Everything about the burial pointed towards sacred power, not just political status. One of the most enigmatic items was a small figurine made of clay and wood, carefully crafted to resemble the lady herself and dressed in miniature versions of her regalia. Its purpose remains debated. Some scholars believe it served as a spiritual vessel, a symbolic double meant to guide or protect her soul. Others suggest it functioned as a ritual decoy, intended to confuse malevolent forces in the afterlife. The Moche were known for their elaborate ceremonial sacrifices, often depicted vividly in their art. Bloodletting and ritual execution were believed to sustain cosmic balance and agricultural fertility. Evidence around the tomb, iconography, vessels, and ritual tools suggest that the Lady of Cow did not merely witness these ceremonies, she presided over them. In this role, she was neither passive nor symbolic. She was an active mediator between humans and gods, a figure whose authority extended over both the physical and spiritual realms. In the eyes of her people, she may have been less a queen and more a living conduit of divine will. Scientific analysis of her remains revealed that she died young, likely between 25 and 30 years old. There is no clear evidence of violent death. Researchers believe she may have died from complications related to childbirth or infection. Whatever the cause, her death must have shaken Moche society deeply. The scale of her burial suggests collective mourning and possibly fear. After her death, archaeological evidence indicates changes in ritual practices and leadership structures in the region. It is possible that no successor could fully replace her spiritual authority. Further studies using infrared and advanced imaging technologies revealed faint tattoo patterns invisible to the naked eye. These markings match religious iconography found on Moche ceramics and murals, leading some researchers to propose that her tattoos formed a symbolic cosmology, a map of belief carried on living skin, not a written doctrine, but a theology inscribed on the body itself. And yet, despite everything uncovered, her identity remains incomplete. No inscription names her. No mural depicts her portrait. DNA analysis shows no direct familial link to known Moche male rulers. This absence is striking. Some scholars suggest her name may have been deliberately omitted, perhaps considered too sacred to record, or understood as a role rather than an individual identity. One theory proposes that the Lady of Cow embodied aspects of Ai-Apayak, the principal Moche deity associated with sacrifice, authority, and regeneration. Her tattoos echo this god's imagery, suggesting she may have been perceived as his earthly manifestation. Another hypothesis suggests she was part of a lineage of elite women, her title passed down, her individuality secondary to the sacred office she held. If true, her tomb may represent the first physical evidence of a female ritual dynasty, one erased by time but once central to Moche cosmology. Today, her preserved remains are housed at the Museo Cao near the El Brujo complex. Visitors stand before her glass enclosure while digital reconstructions restore her face from bone to living form. Her gaze, recreated from anatomy and science, seems calm, distant, and commanding. She ruled without leaving a single written word. The Lady of Cao has transformed our understanding of ancient Peru. She dismantled long-held assumptions about gender, power, and spirituality in pre-Columbian societies. She revealed a civilization far more fluid, complex, and symbolically rich than once imagined. She is both history and enigma. A ruler without a recorded name, a woman buried as a god. Perhaps her anonymity is the point. Perhaps her silence is intentional, a message from the past that power does not require names, and memory does not always need words. Some mysteries endure not because they lack answers, but because they were never meant to be fully uncovered. And so the Lady of Cao remains, between science and myth, between mortality and divinity, reminding us that sometimes the unknown is what keeps history alive. Discovered more than a century ago beneath the quiet fields of North Yorkshire, England, the Neolithic chalk drums remain among the most perplexing artifacts ever recovered from prehistoric Britain. At first glance, they seem almost unremarkable. Small cylinders carved from soft white chalk, modest in scale, fragile in appearance, and easily overlooked. They look as though they should have crumbled long ago. Yet beneath their pale surfaces lies a depth of meaning that continues to unsettle archaeologists, historians, and cognitive scientists alike. These objects are not simply remnants of a distant past, they are deliberate expressions, silent messages shaped by hands that lived more than 5,000 years ago, created by a culture whose spoken language has vanished, but whose ideas remain carved in stone. Each drum was sculpted from a single block of chalk and carefully decorated with intricate designs, spirals that fold inward endlessly, concentric circles nested with precision, zigzag lines, paired oval shapes resembling eyes, and complex interlaced patterns. Every mark was placed with intention. The symmetry is striking. The spacing is controlled. The rhythm of the designs suggests planning, not improvisation. What is most astonishing is the level of geometric understanding these carvings display. Chalk is a fragile medium, easily fractured. To carve such fine, consistent lines without breaking the material would have required patience, skill, and extraordinary control. These were not casual decorations. They reflect a visual intelligence that challenges long-held assumptions about Neolithic craftsmanship. But what do they mean? The first 3 chalk drums were discovered in 1889 near the village of Folkton, placed carefully beside the bodies of children within a burial mound. More than a century later, in 2015, a 4th and even more elaborately decorated drum was uncovered at Burton Agnes, just a few miles away. Despite being carved from chalk, a material highly vulnerable to moisture and erosion, all 4 survived in remarkable condition, sealed within their graves for millennia. To this day, they rank among the most finely decorated prehistoric objects ever found in the British Isles. They are known as drums, but the name is misleading. There is no evidence they were ever struck or used to produce sound. No traces of skin, cords, or wear from percussion exist. Instead, they communicate visually. Their surfaces speak through geometry rather than noise, through pattern rather than rhythm. The motifs carved into the drums are not unique. Spirals, zigzags, and concentric circles appear throughout Neolithic Europe, from the passage tombs of Ireland to carved stones in Brittany and Iberia. This recurring visual language suggests something profound, a shared symbolic system understood across vast distances by communities with no written script. Spirals may have represented the sun, seasonal cycles, or the journey between life and death.
Parallel lines could signify pathways, rivers, spiritual routes, or ancestral connections. Concentric circles, found also at Stonehenge and other ceremonial sites, may symbolize cosmic order or celestial movement. The eye-like forms carved into some drums have been interpreted as protective symbols, watching over the dead and guiding them into the next world. Yet some researchers believe the meaning runs deeper. Under raking light, the carvings reveal an extraordinary feature. The patterns seem to shift. Shadows move across roofs, giving the designs a sense of depth and motion. These drums were carved with an awareness of how light would interact with surface. A single line changes character depending on angle and illumination. This raises a striking possibility. These were not merely decorative symbols, but elements of a visual language, a system designed to be read by the eye and mind rather than the ear. In a world without writing, meaning was embedded in form. Every line may have represented an idea: water, time, rebirth, death, continuity. Arranged together, they may have conveyed stories, prayers, or cosmological knowledge.
Some archaeologists have suggested the patterns encode lunar or solar cycles, functioning as mnemonic devices to track time or ritual calendars. Others believe they were tools for preserving myths, genealogies, or sacred knowledge passed orally from generation to generation. Nothing is certain. Every interpretation remains provisional. What deepens the mystery is their burial context. Each chalk drum was placed in the grave of a child, not discarded, not hidden, but carefully positioned as if meant to accompany or protect the young in death. This association with childhood suggests symbolism tied to purity, renewal, or transition. In Neolithic belief systems, where the boundary between the living and the spiritual world was fluid, these objects may have served as guides, charms, or offerings. The act of carving itself may have been ritualistic. Inscribing symbols into stone, especially a material associated with the earth, could have been a way of communicating with ancestral or divine forces. In this worldview, carving was not art alone, it was an act of devotion. Some researchers have proposed that the drums belonged to a ceremonial or priestly tradition. The spirals may reflect trance imagery, representing altered states of consciousness or the soul's journey beyond the physical world. The widespread repetition of these motifs across Neolithic monuments suggests they were deeply embedded in spiritual thought. Then came a surprising discovery. In the early 21st century, researchers noticed that the circumferences of the Folkestone and Burton Agnes drums correspond closely to units of measurement found in Neolithic architecture, including the spacing and dimensions used at Stonehenge. The diameters of the drums align with consistent proportional ratios, suggesting they may have been used as measuring devices, tools to standardize construction in sacred spaces. If this interpretation is correct, the chalk drums represent something extraordinary, an early attempt to encode mathematical knowledge into portable objects, not written numbers, but embodied measurement, geometry held in the hand. This idea fits within a growing recognition that Neolithic societies possessed sophisticated understandings of proportion, geometry, and astronomy long before formal mathematics existed. The drums may have served as bridges between ritual and science, art and calculation, belief and structure. Perhaps that is their true power. They do not speak through words, but through pattern, rhythm, and proportion. When light touches their carved surfaces today, it activates the same visual intelligence that shaped them thousands of years ago. Their language bypasses speech and addresses perception itself. The Neolithic chalk drums remind us that meaning does not require writing, that early humans sought to preserve knowledge of time, death, rebirth, and the cosmos through form alone.
Every spiral is a thought, every groove is an idea fixed in stone. Today, the drums are housed in the British Museum, displayed under carefully controlled light to protect their fragile surfaces. Visitors often pass them without realizing what they are seeing, one of the oldest symbolic systems ever carved by human hands. Small, unassuming objects, yet within them resides the intellectual and spiritual world of a vanished civilization, a culture capable of honoring its dead, measuring its monuments, and encoding cosmic order without a single written word. What those symbols truly meant remains unknown. Were they prayers, measurements, ritual maps, astronomical records, or something we no longer have the conceptual language to understand? Perhaps we never will. And that is why the chalk drums endure, not as artifacts alone, but as riddles carved in silence, waiting for minds willing to listen without expecting easy answers.